Well, folks, it's been a couple months since my initial review of Japanese Driftmaster, and the dev team has been pretty busy pushing out updates in all sorts of different areas of the game, including today's major patch, which touts Physics 2.0, a big rework to the game's handling, which definitely piqued my interest. So I figure now might be a good time to jump back in and see where the game's at. If you didn't catch my review or just need a quick refresher, this was a game I really wanted to like, but it missed the mark for me. I had some issues with the handling in multiple areas, the drifting felt too on rails, the tire model was pretty wonky, and the grip driving was just not very fun. I also had bigger issues with how the scoring systems worked, both in missions where it actually could benefit you to go against the goal in order to make more money, and in the challenge mode where you could essentially exploit by going off track and burning extra time on the clock by just doing donuts instead of actually drifting the course. So the core gameplay of JDM didn't really click for me. The rest of the game was fun enough. I thought the map and the story, while both a bit over the top, were still enjoyable. But once I wrapped up the campaign and finished climbing the leaderboards, I put the game down and haven't picked it up since. Today though, I am back in Gintama to check out the new handling model and take a peek at all the new stuff they've brought to the game since its launch back in May. So of course for me, the big thing I need to test first is the handling. And for that, we're gonna head to a place I spent a lot of time at, the Ebigo EC track. What you're watching here are legitimately my first minutes back in the game. I didn't practice before filming this. I'm not cutting anything to make myself look better or whatever. I figure it'd be best to just give you that raw initial footage and first impression. So this car I'm driving, the S14, was definitely one of my favorite drift cars back at launch. I got it to a point where the drifting felt pretty fun, and that's definitely still the case here. I'm on the Simcade handling for what it's worth, and it feels like I have a decent bit more control over the car. One of my biggest initial complaints was how on rails the drifting felt. You couldn't use the tools at your disposal to drift the way you wanted to. You couldn't inject your own style into it, and I do feel like that's gotten a bit better. One of the things I'm noticing, which was mentioned in the patch notes, is the better braking. In real life, your foot brake is a very valuable tool while drifting. It can help you scrub a lot of speed while holding angle into a tight corner, but in JDM at launch, the brakes felt pretty useless. It's like they installed plastic brake pads on every car, and that meant you couldn't rely on using the foot brake to control speed and angle. It does feel a bit better now, I can actually use the foot brake to pull the car into a corner, but they could honestly go further here. The brakes still feel like they don't have any bite to them. It's like I'm stuck on low brake pressure still or something. It's overall a positive, but they could still go a lot further with it. For the rest of the handling, while I do think overall the tire model is now better about the balance between lateral and forward grip while in a drift, I think they overcorrected here, or maybe corrected things in the wrong way and ended up nerfing straight line grip a bit too much. Again, going back to my issues about the on-rails feel, I didn't enjoy how little momentum there was to the cars. In real life, if you're driving straight and then flick the car into a drift, you're gonna keep going relatively straight. But at launch in JDM, it kind of forced you into an angle. It forced the car to turn in the direction it was pointing, which made it a lot harder to do big entries or extend more shallow drifts to link corners. Instead, you had to manji everything, which just doesn't feel cool to me. Now, however, it feels like they've turned down that directional grip, which is good for being able to set up longer, wider radius drifts and having more control over your line. However, it feels like they made this change to the tires, not the actual weight and momentum of the car itself. Instead of actually increasing the momentum of the whole car, they just turned down tire grip to mimic that feeling. And that means that when you do get on the power, your tires don't have any grip to push the car forward. It's kind of like drifting on snow or ice, where you can slide the car really easily, but you'll end up often overshooting too wide out of corners because you don't have the grip to pull the car around the turn. The tires now just don't feel quite grippy enough when you don't have traction. So overall, this does feel like a net positive, but the new lack of forward grip when you're drifting is a step backwards to me. It's especially noticeable while trying to do donuts or low-speed burnouts. It's just really slippery. And that brings us to the scoring. Unfortunately, no noticeable changes have been made here yet. You can still go off track and benefit from doing so. You can still rack up points by just doing donuts in the parking lot, and it seems like cheating is now an issue too. Now, they did mention in their summer update about a month ago that they implemented basic anti-cheat that would automatically delete unobtainable and unrealistic scores, but I can tell you fairly confidently that these top drift scores of well over 100 million are all quite unobtainable and very much still there. The time attack scores do seem better though. So honestly, anti-cheat is always a huge pain, especially for a smaller studio. Like, it's just this never-ending uphill battle of cat and mouse, and it's a lot of resources for a smaller team to spend. But I do hope this is something they keep working at, because clean and fair leaderboards are important. I also do hope we get a rework to the scoring system at some point, with penalties for going off track and no reward for just doing donuts. Also, side note, I swear I used to be able to tab through pages on these boards to see everyone's position, but that seems gone now. I can only see my place and the top 10. Am I just being a dork? Like, can I not find that, or what's going on there? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, overall, the drift handling is better. I think I could say I like it now under the right conditions as long as the car is built right. But the scoring system still lets it down, and I do still want to see further improvements to the tire model and grip levels. For a quick note as well on the grip handling, the grip driving does also feel a bit better with the improved braking, but it's still fairly understeery on most cars, and again, braking performance could certainly be turned up even more. And that pretty much does it for the new Physics 2.0 update. And with that, I want to take a quick step back to the summer update, which came out last month, because it's worth pointing out that the game got a photo mode. Every game needs a photo mode. This is great to see, and what's even cooler, I always love when games do this, is that they implemented some gameplay that uses the new photo mode. There are landmarks scattered all around the map that you can take photos at to level up your car. Annoyingly, I had a bug where the camera was just not able to focus at a distance. Like, the furthest away focus level was still way too close. So I'm not sure if that's new or specific to me. I couldn't find anything about it on their Discord yet, so your mileage may vary. They also improved upscaling settings, added FSR, and improved frame gen, added HDR support, and made some other performance tweaks, which are all good. They added a few smaller QOL tweaks as well, like adding more destructibles to the world instead of having so many rigid barriers, but I was still running into a lot of rigid barriers, so hopefully they keep on that. They also made fast travel a bit quicker, which was one of my little nagging issues with the game. I'm happy to see that, and they said they made improvements to GPS routing, but it almost feels worse than before to me. It was giving me a bad route more often than it would give me the correct one, so that's not a big deal, but it definitely still needs work. The summer update also added new cars and customization, which is always good to see. They added preset tunes as well for drift and grip setups, and brought back the Rise of the Scorpion story from the early sort of prequel slash demo of the game, which is great because now the full product has that kind of story expansion to play. But with that, let's bring it back to this newest update to talk about some more features and improvements that were just added. For starters, there's a new building on the map, a multi-story parking garage near the port in the city. This is pretty cool. I really hope they keep at stuff like this because there are quite a few blocked off areas in the map that I want to go to, and expanding the base map of the game is always a good idea to me. And there's also a new underground mission that uses this space, which is nice to see. The patch notes also mention improvements to the traffic UI, specifically to density and behavior, and I didn't notice any major differences. They said that mountain roads would now be less congested with fewer traffic pileups, but I definitely still saw a lot of heavy traffic on the mountain roads. I also didn't really understand this part of the devlog. They say that on highways, traffic will now be less inclined to change lanes and move out of the player's way unless the player is driving directly behind them. But then right after that, they say that the traffic will also change lanes more frequently, forcing the player to be more mindful when speeding on the freeways. I'm guessing maybe this is a change where they change lanes less based on what the player is doing and more just at random, but I'm not really understanding the goal of that. Maybe it's just a typo, maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but either way, I didn't notice many changes to the traffic levels or behaviors while playing. They also improved opponent AI, which is great to see. Races or drift events against other drivers were always fairly chaotic. It was a bit of a roll of the dice. The AI would very obviously cheat the physics and kind of drive all over the road, and they still sort of do that. The AI still doesn't really follow a normal racing line. They crash into you and each other. They seem a bit more afraid of you when you pass them, but aside from that, I still wouldn't call these races fun. The drifting AI does seem noticeably better though. They're taking more logical lines that are easier to follow, but they still get weird speed boosts and slowdowns that don't seem tethered to the same physics the player is beholden to. So overall, the AI improvements are sort of fitting the theme of the update of, yeah, it's better, but there's still work to be done. And finally, we got another new car, the NA1 NSX, which comes with 3 wide-body kits, and there is a pretty healthy handful of new customization for existing cars as well. I'll go ahead and throw that up on screen, and folks, as far as I can tell, that just about covers it. There are a couple other minor changes, little fixes here and there, and one feature I didn't really cover, which is the new preset cars in challenge mode, which is kind of cool, but not that important if you already have good cars yourself. But either way, in all, I'm really happy to see Gaming Factory continue to work on the game. Progress has been quick. I mean, the game's only been out 2 months, and we've already seen a pretty large list of improvements in a lot of different areas of the game. Unfortunately, it still feels like a handful of those improvements are missing the mark and feel more like sidesteps instead of upgrades. But it is very clear that they're listening and responding to the right feedback, and it seems like they've got a pretty good workflow where they're able to put out content and fixes fairly quickly, which definitely bodes well for the future of the game. For me personally, these updates aren't really enough to pull me back in, at least not for more than an hour or two to write this video. You know, I don't have that itch to keep playing afterwards, but I definitely will still keep an eye on JDM going forward, because this team is obviously passionate about the game and focused in the right direction. Thanks for watching, folks. Let me know how you guys have been feeling about JDM lately and what your thoughts are on this new update, and I'll see you in the next video.